When a racist taunt in the cafeteria sparks an unexpected connection, two teens discover that the bridge between hatred and healing is built with shared pain and the courage to change. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The first bell of the day rang through the hallways of Westview High School. Students shuffled toward their homerooms, the usual Monday morning energy subdued by the prospect of another school week. Mr. Thompson's classroom was almost full when he gestured for the students' attention. Good morning, everyone. Before we start today, I'd like to introduce a new addition to our class. This is Amara Johnson, who just moved here from Atlanta. Please make her feel welcome. Amara stood nervously at the front of the class. Her dark skin contrasted with the bright yellow of her sweater, and her natural hair was styled in neat box braids adorned with wooden beads that clicked softly as she moved. She offered a tentative smile to her new classmates. "Hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to getting to know you all," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. Several students smiled back, while others simply stared or returned to their phones. "Thank you, Amara. You can take that empty seat next to Zoe," Mr. Thompson said, pointing to a desk in the third row. As Amara made her way to her seat, she caught the eye of a boy in the back row. Brandon Miller, the school's star basketball player, was watching her with narrowed eyes. Lunchtime arrived, and Amara had made it through her morning classes without incident. She had even met a few friendly faces. Zoe from homeroom had introduced her to her friend group, and they'd invited her to sit with them at lunch. As she navigated the crowded cafeteria with her tray, she felt a small sense of relief. Before she could reach Zoe's table, Brandon stepped directly into her path. He was tall and imposing, his Letterman jacket marking him as one of the school's athletes. Two of his friends flanked him, their expressions a mix of amusement and anticipation. Well, the new girl," Brandon announced loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "Shouldn't you be sitting with your own kind?" Amara took a deep breath. "Excuse me?" "I'm just trying to get to my friends," Brandon smirked. "Friends? You've been here for what, 4 hours? No one here wants to be friends with a monkey?" The cafeteria seemed to freeze. Gasps came from several tables, and Zoe half rose from her seat, looking horrified. Amara stood perfectly still, her knuckles white against her lunch tray. "What did you just call me?" Her voice was quiet but clear in the sudden silence. "You heard me," Brandon replied, stepping closer and deliberately, knocking into her shoulder, causing her tray to wobble. "We don't need your kind here." The contents of Amara's tray clattered, but she managed to keep her grip. Something shifted in her expression. The shock gave way to something steady and resolute. "My kind?" Amara asked, placing her tray down on the nearest table. "You mean honors students? Because I was in the top 5% of my class in Atlanta? Or do you mean basketball players? Because I was team captain at my old school." Brandon's friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, but he doubled down. "You know exactly what I mean," he sneered, pushing her shoulder with his hand. "Go back to where you came from." The cafeteria was dead silent now. Even a few teachers on lunch duty had noticed the confrontation and were moving in their direction. But before they could intervene, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "Brandon, stop it!" It was Marcus, Brandon's best friend and co-captain of the basketball team. He stepped forward, his expression serious. "This isn't you, man." Brandon turned to Marcus, betrayal flashing across his face. "Seriously? You're defending her?" "I'm telling you that you're being someone I don't recognize right now," Marcus replied firmly. "My grandmother didn't march in Selma so you could stand here and act like this." Brandon's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. He looked around at the sea of disapproving faces. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. "You don't know anything about me," he said to Amara, but his voice had lost its edge. "You're right, Amara replied calmly. "And you don't know anything about me either. But you decided who I was the moment you saw me." She reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone, bringing up a photo. She held it up to Brandon. It showed a younger Amara in a hospital bed, next to a young boy connected to various tubes and monitors. Both kids were smiling despite the clinical setting. "That's my little brother Jamal," she explained, her voice softer now. "He has sickle cell disease. We moved here because there's a specialist at Westview Medical Center who's pioneering a new treatment. My dad took a pay cut to transfer here. My mom is working nights now. We left everything we knew behind for a chance to give my brother a better life." Brandon stared at the photo, his angry facade crumbling. His eyes welled with tears, surprising. "Everyone, including himself. My cousin?" he started, his voice breaking. "My cousin died from sickle cell last year. He was 12. The silence in the cafeteria now felt different, heavy with shared emotion rather than tension. Brandon wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassment warring with genuine grief on his face. "I'm so sorry about your cousin," Amara said sincerely. "And I'm sorry you're hurting, but that doesn't give you the right to hurt others." Brandon nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I know I shouldn't have said those things or touched you. I was way out of line." Principal Watkins had arrived at the scene, her expression grave. "Mr. Miller, my office, now." As Brandon turned to follow the principal, Amara called after him. "My brother's in the hospital every Thursday for treatments. I read to him, but he gets bored with just me. He loves basketball." Brandon paused, looking back at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Maybe you could come sometime," she offered. "Only if you want to learn how to be a better person than you were today." Marcus put his hand on Brandon's shoulder. "I'll come too. We all need to do better." As Brandon followed the principal out of the cafeteria, the other students began to approach Amara, offering support, introducing themselves, extending genuine welcomes. Zoe hugged her and whispered an apology for not standing up sooner. The pediatric ward of Westview Medical Center was a world unto itself, sealed off from the rest of the hospital by colorful murals and a set of double doors adorned with cartoon characters. The usual antiseptic hospital smell was subtly masked by the scent of fruit-flavored candies and the floral arrangement that sat at the nurse's station. On this particular Thursday afternoon, the autumn sun streamed through the windows, casting long rectangles of golden light across the polished linoleum floors. Amara Johnson walked the familiar path to room 217, her footsteps confident and measured. She'd made this journey twice a week for the past month, ever since her family had moved to this town for her brother's specialized treatment. The weight of her backpack, filled with books and homework, pressed against her shoulders, but it wasn't nearly as heavy as the weight she'd carried when she first arrived at Westview High School. That burden had lightened considerably in the past 2 weeks, not forgotten, but transformed into something else entirely. She paused outside her brother's room, hearing the faint sound of laughter from within. The sound brought a smile to her face. Jamal's laughter had been all too rare in recent months. She pushed the door open gently, not wanting to interrupt whatever was causing that precious sound. The scene that greeted her was one she was still getting used to. Jamal, propped up against his pillows, his thin frame swimming in a hospital gown decorated with superhero logos, was laughing at something Brandon Miller had just said. Brandon sat in the chair closest to the bed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his Letterman jacket draped over the back of the chair. Beside him, Marcus Thompson was demonstrating what appeared to be a basketball move with his hands. His expression animated. And then Coach said, "If you're going to shoot like that, you might as well be throwing rocks at the moon," Brandon was saying, his voice warm with humor. "I swear I've never seen anyone miss a free throw by that much." Jamal's laughter bubbled up again, bright and clear, despite the IV line taped to the back of his hand and the monitor displaying his vitals. At 12 years old, he was small for his age, a side effect of the sickle cell disease that had shaped his life, but his spirit remained undimmed. "Hey, sis!" Jamal called as he spotted Amara in the doorway. "Brandon was just telling me about their practice yesterday. Coach Reynolds sounds like a character." Amara stepped into the room, setting her backpack on the windowsill. "He definitely is. I've seen him at school. He looks like he's about to explode when someone misses an easy shot." Brandon turned in his seat, offering Amara a smile that held none of the arrogance she'd seen on her first day. "Hey, Amara. How was the chemistry test?" "Brutal," she replied, but returned his smile. "But I think I aced it. Mr. Harmon's questions were exactly what you said they'd be." Brandon nodded, a hint of pride crossing his features. "Told you. That study guide I gave you has been passed down through 3 years of chem students. It's legendary." The easy conversation between them still felt surreal to Amara. 2 weeks ago, this boy had called her a horrible name in front of the entire cafeteria. 2 weeks ago, he had pushed her and told her to go back where she came from. And now, here he was, sitting beside her brother's hospital bed, bringing laughter and basketball stories and homework tips. "Your parents coming today?" Marcus asked. Leaning back in his chair, Amara nodded. "Mom's finishing her shift downstairs in the lab, and Dad's bringing dinner for everyone around 6. He's making his famous jerk chicken. The one you were telling us about?" Brandon's eyes lit up. "Man, I've been thinking about that since you described it last week." "It's the best," Jamal confirmed, his eyes bright despite the dark circles beneath them. "Dad only makes it for special occasions." "What's the occasion?" Marcus asked. Jamal grinned, revealing the gap where he'd recently lost a tooth. "Dr. Patel said my numbers look better today. The new treatment might be working." A wave of emotion passed through the room. Hope, tentative, but present. Amara moved to her brother's side, taking his hand in hers and squeezing gently. The bones felt bird-like beneath his skin, fragile but resilient. "That's amazing, Jay," Brandon said, his voice soft with genuine emotion. "That's the best news." Amara studied Brandon's face, noting the sincerity in his expression. The change in him over the past 2 weeks hadn't been sudden or dramatic. There had been no Hollywood moment of instant transformation. Instead, it had been a gradual process that began with a tearful apology in Principal Watkins' office and continued with halting conversations in the hallways at school. The first time Brandon had asked if he could visit Jamal, Amara had been skeptical. But something in his eyes, a vulnerability she'd never expected to see in the school's star athlete, had convinced her to give him a chance. Marcus had come along too, serving as both friend and buffer, ensuring that the visit wouldn't be awkward or uncomfortable. To everyone's surprise, Brandon and Jamal had connected instantly. Perhaps it was because Brandon spoke of his cousin who had died from the same disease, sharing stories that made the boy sound like a superhero rather than a victim. Or perhaps it was simply that Brandon, stripped of his school persona, was genuinely good with kids. Whatever the reason, Jamal had looked forward to their visits ever since. "I brought something for you," Brandon said now, reaching into his backpack. He pulled out a brand new basketball, its orange surface unmarked by use. "The whole team signed it for you. Coach, too." Jamal's eyes widened as Brandon handed him the ball. "For real? This is for me?" "For real," Brandon confirmed, his smile widening. "And there's more. Coach said that when you're feeling up to it, you can come to one of our practices. Be our honorary assistant coach for a day." Jamal clutched the basketball to his chest, his smile so wide it looked like it might split his face. "That would be the coolest thing ever." "Can I, Amara? Do you think Mom and Dad would let me?" "We'd have to ask Dr. Patel first," Amara said, unable to keep the emotion from her voice. "But if she says it's okay, I'm sure Mom and Dad will agree." The door opened again, and Amara's parents stepped in. Mrs. Johnson, still in her lab coat, from her shift, carried a small stack of magazines. Mr. Johnson followed with a large insulated bag that emanated the spicy, sweet aroma of his celebrated jerk chicken. "Well, look at this party," Mrs. Johnson said, her tired face lighting up at the sight of her son's visitors. "Brandon, Marcus, so good to see you boys again." "Thank you for having us, Mrs. Johnson," Marcus replied, standing to help her with the magazines. Mr. Johnson set the food down on the rolling tray table. "Hope everyone's hungry. I made plenty. Dad, look what Brandon brought me." Jamal held up the signed basketball, his excitement palpable. As Mr. Johnson examined the ball with appropriate admiration, Amara watched her mother's gaze drift to Brandon. There was still a touch of wariness there, a mother's protective instinct toward the child who had been hurt. But there was something else too. A growing recognition that people could change, that forgiveness wasn't just a word, but an action that required courage from both sides. "That was very thoughtful, Brandon," Mrs. Johnson said, her voice warm if not yet completely at ease. Brandon ducked his head slightly, a gesture that Amara had come to recognize as genuine humility. "It was the team's idea, ma'am. Everyone wanted to do something for Jamal after hearing his story." "And how did they hear his story?" Mrs. Johnson asked, though she already knew the answer. "I told them," Brandon admitted, "at practice last week. I told them about what happened at school, what I did, and about meeting Jamal. Coach turned it into a whole discussion about respect and community." Mr. Johnson paused in his unpacking of the food. "That couldn't have been easy, son. Owning up to mistakes rarely is." Brandon glanced at Amara, a silent communication passing between them. Acknowledgement of the journey they'd both undertaken these past 2 weeks. It wasn't easy, he agreed, but it was necessary. The conversation shifted as Mr. Johnson began distributing containers of food. The aroma of jerk chicken, rice and peas, and fried plantains filled the small hospital room, transforming it momentarily into a space of celebration rather than treatment. As they ate, Jamal regaled everyone with stories from his morning physical therapy session, his enthusiasm making even the mundane sound exciting. Brandon and Marcus shared news from school, the upcoming basketball tournament, the drama in Mr. Thompson's English class, the rumors about the Halloween dance. Amara watched it all, a strange feeling of fullness in her chest. This wasn't what she had expected when she'd moved to this town. She hadn't expected to face such blatant racism on her first day, nor had she expected to find such redemption in its aftermath. She hadn't expected Brandon Miller to become a regular visitor to her brother's hospital room, or for Marcus Thompson to offer to help her start a student awareness group for sickle cell disease at school. Life, she was learning, rarely unfolded according to expectation. As the evening progressed, nurses came and went, checking Jamal's vitals and administering medication. The conversation continued to flow, punctuated by laughter and the occasional serious discussion about Jamal's treatment options. Through it all, Amara noticed how Brandon seemed to have settled into a new version of himself, still confident, still charismatic, but with an added layer of thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. Later, as visiting hours came to an end, Amara walked Brandon and Marcus to the elevator. Her parents remained with Jamal, helping him settle in for the night. "Thanks for coming today," she said as they waited for the elevator to arrive. "It means a lot to Jamal." "It means a lot to us too," Marcus replied, adjusting the strap of his gym bag on his shoulder. "Your brother's a cool kid." Brandon nodded in agreement, but his expression had grown serious. "Can I talk to you for a second?" he asked Amara, gesturing a few steps away from the elevator. Amara followed him, curious. "What's up?" Brandon took a deep breath. "I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking about it all week, but I wasn't sure how to say it." "Just say it," Amara suggested gently. "I'm applying to volunteer here at the hospital," he said, the words coming out in a rush. There's a program for high school students. You work with kids in the pediatric ward, playing games, reading stories, just being there. Amara's surprise must have shown on her face because Brandon quickly continued. It's not just because of Jamal or because of what happened. I mean, that's part of it, but when my cousin was sick, there was this volunteer who would come and play chess with him. It was the highlight of his week. I want to be that person for someone else. Brandon, that's amazing, Amara said, genuinely moved. I think you'd be great at it. Really? You think so? The vulnerability in his voice was striking. I know so, she assured him. I've seen you with Jamal. You have a gift for making people feel seen and heard. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and Marcus held the door open. You guys coming or what? Brandon turned to Amara, offering his fist for a bump. See you tomorrow at school? Amara smiled and bumped his fist with her own. See you tomorrow. As the elevator doors closed, taking Brandon and Marcus down to the lobby, Amara leaned against the wall, letting out a long breath. 2 weeks ago, she couldn't have imagined this moment. 2 weeks ago, the wound of Brandon's words had been fresh and raw. Now, standing in the quiet hospital corridor, Amara realized that healing didn't always look the way you expected it to. Sometimes it came in the form of signed basketballs and jerk chicken dinners. Sometimes it came in the laughter of a sick child or the humble admission of a former bully. And sometimes it came in the recognition that bridges could be built across even the widest divides if only people were willing to take the first step. She turned and walked back to her brother's room, her steps lighter than they had been in a long time. There was still a long road ahead for all of them. Jamal's treatment, the challenges of a new school, the work of building genuine understanding. But for now, in this moment, the path forward seemed clear and bright with possibility. The door to room 217 stood open, framing her parents as they sat beside Jamal's bed. Her mother was reading aloud from one of his favorite books, her voice soft and melodic. Her father's hand rested gently on Jamal's shoulder, a silent promise of presence and protection. And Jamal, despite the tubes and monitors, looked peaceful. The signed basketball clutched loosely in his arms even as his eyelids grew heavy with sleep. Amara stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. Her family, together and whole, despite everything they'd faced. The journey had been difficult, but they had made it this far. And with unexpected allies like Brandon and Marcus, the road ahead seemed less daunting than it had before. With a soft smile, Amara stepped into the room, closing the door gently behind her. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, one day, one step, one bridge at a time.